Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello, and welcome back to All Home Care Matters. If this is your first time visiting us here at the show, we want to say thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We appreciate how valuable everyone's time is, and that's why we try and make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that will hopefully matter to you. Today, we are honored to welcome the Executive Director of Maude's Awards, Marilyn Raichle, along with a previous Maude's Award winner, Marigrace Becker. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's our pleasure. Marilyn, let's start with you. For our viewers and listeners who may not be aware of Maude's Awards, would you mind giving them a little insight into what Maude's Awards are?
Maude's Awards began, it was the inspiration of Maude Ferry, and Richard and Maude Ferry had what Richard would quite accurately describe as the American dream. So they had this fabulous marriage, and he was a successful corporate executive as the co-founder of Korn Ferry International. And he describes Maude as the matriarch extraordinaire. She was his beloved wife, his partner, and also the mother of 6 children, 12 grandchildren, and I believe at this moment, 4 great-grandchildren. And they had a fabulous life. And about 2013, things started to change. He started to note, sort of memory lapses and miss things, and they didn't know what this was. And then finally in 2016, things had progressed to the point where they realized there was something wrong. And they realized it was dementia. And he, like most caregivers, hadn't the faintest idea what to do. He had very little background in this. And so he started to read and research and talk to people and look for any way he could find to bring happiness and joy to her life. And he looked and looked and looked. And finally, in 2018, he created Maude's Awards for innovation in Alzheimer's care to help him find the answers. And our goal is to discover and to celebrate, and I think most importantly, to share innovative practices and programs that are bringing joy to people living with dementia and their care partners, that are supporting their lives. And this is we're now in our 4th year, and every year we make awards, not grants, but awards for achievements, and to 3 organizations, $25,000 each, and 5 individuals at $5,000 each. And so far it puts you in touch with this extraordinary wealth of innovation and minds and people and individuals out there who are doing fabulous things. I'm going to include Marigrace in this. That it's extraordinary how much is going on that can enrich the lives of people living with dementia. And it is equally extraordinary how much more needs to be done, how few people, relatively speaking, we are reaching. Right. And so it's an enormous honor to be doing this. It's an enormous honor to be doing good.
Well, and I think also, and I don't want to speak for, Mr. Ferry, but in a way, it's also keeping Maude's legacy alive for all the good that she's doing. And I think for me, talking to so many different innovators and organizations, that a lot of them start from that, from a personal story, a personal experience where a loved one had an illness or had dementia, and they take that tragedy, if you will, and then they transfer it into doing all this remarkable good for helping to raise awareness and bring funding in and bringing resources in. It doesn't ever replace the person, but it keeps them alive in that sense. And I just think it's tremendous, the work that Maude's Awards is doing. And now I know we introduced Marigrace as the director of memory care or the Memory Hub at the University of Washington, but she's joining us because she's one of the prior winners of a Maude's Awards, correct?
Well, I was involved in a large network of organizations that won collectively.
Okay, and you're the director of the Memory Hub. And for our viewers and listeners who may not be familiar with the Memory Hub, would you mind sharing what it's all about?
Absolutely. The Memory Hub is here in Seattle, operated by the UW Memory and Brain Wellness Center, so part of University of Washington. And we've been open for just over a year. We had our 1-year anniversary just a couple weeks back. Our focus is on helping people live well with memory loss by operating a collaborative community center with a variety of different programs and events and services that do promote a good life with dementia.
How did you get involved with that?
I had been running the Memory and Brain Wellness Center support and education programs for about 8 years. And at the same time, had been keeping an eye out in the region for where could we locate a non-clinical space where we could bring those programs and then also potentially work on enhancing collaboration between like-minded organizations that serve folks with dementia. We came upon the space and then just went for it.
Now, is this something people do in person? Is it virtual? What types of programs does the Memory Hub offer?
Mm-hmm. There's a variety of different programs in terms of format. Most of them are in person right now, and then some of them are online that have been online since the pandemic and will probably continue that way in order to increase accessibility for folks that live outside of Seattle. And the programs include things like support programs, so support groups for people with memory loss and family caregivers, educational programs, so things like we do a regular orientation for people recently diagnosed with dementia and their families to help them get a sense of the resources that are out there and the next steps that can be supportive to them. We also have caregiver workshops through one of the partner organizations here, Full Life Care. There's an adult day program that's run by one of the partners called Elderwise. The Alzheimer's Association is also a partner, and they do free 30-minute consults with people with memory loss and their families to touch on different resources. We also do nature-based programming, tech programming to support independence with dementia, and a variety of other things too.
Wonderful. So Marilyn, what other types? So we have a great example here with Marigrace. What other types of innovators or resources have been previous winners of Maude's Awards?
Well, I'll never find a better example than Marigrace, but I will continue. There are so many. So I've gone through some of them because one of your questions was, and what are they doing now? And so one of our very first winners from the first year was Allison Schreier for her extraordinary book called How to Be Friends with Somebody Who Has Dementia. And for me, because I knew nothing a long time ago, that was sort of a gateway that it enabled me to sort of understand. And I go, And so she created this really wonderful program. But then she's been involved in so many things, and now she's really focused on Zinnia TV. Yeah. And Zinnia TV is a program of very short videos created by caregivers for caregivers, and they're on a variety of subjects, but they're very short and they're very relaxing and beautiful and engaging on all sorts of topics. And so it's a program that's near and dear to her heart. And when you see them, you just want to see them. Some people just play them all day long. And then there's Lorette Flyer, who was the author of Nana's books. And again, sort of in that vein of Zinnia TV, these are books that people carry with them, give them sustenance and joy. And they're expanding. One program that's really expanding is the I'm Still Here Foundation, which won last year. And this was founded by John Zeisel, who wrote the groundbreaking book called I'm Still Here. And so he started the I'm Still Here Foundation, which has legacy programs that embody their basic, most important principles of dignity and community and engagement of the full person. And that's like meet me at the movies, meet me at the museum, but they also do, and this is what's really expanding, they make grants every year for innovative programs that are bringing programs that incorporate those principles to memory care, um, continuing care facilities, and to home caregivers. And this is in process every year, and it's starting to expand because so they're starting to have programs all over the country. And this I can only see expanding every year. One other program is Duet, Partners in Health and Aging. And that was inspired by Dr. Pauline Boss's another groundbreaking book, coping. Let's see, I'm going to have to read this because I have too many things in my mind. Loving someone with dementia, how to find hope while dealing with stress and grief. And they started this 10-week free video program where caregivers could learn about how to be, ways they can improve their lives as caregivers. But now they have begun the Finding Meaning and Hope Institute, which provides around the care video support for caregivers. And that's growing. Again, these are growing all over the country. And they just keep growing because the demand for support is so profound. And then, of course, there's the 14-year-old, which I always like to talk about. Haley Richmond won a Maude's Awards last year and for a program called Kid Caregivers and Puzzle Time. She began this when she was 12. I think she probably had it in her mind before that because she was trying to find ways to engage with her grandmother, and playing jigsaw puzzles was really good. And so she formed an organization called Kid Caregivers, which gives kids support who are dealing with a loved one, a grandparent who has dementia, but also gives them ways to bring joy to that person's life and that they can work together. Then she started Puzzle Time. She works with the Girl Scouts. She has thousands of volunteers. This program is now in all 50 states and in 9 countries. She is serving 100,000 people every year. And one of the things I love about it is, number one, I have no idea what she's going to be doing when she's 21. We just need to sit back and wait. But the other one, we talk a lot about intergenerational programs and how the next generation can get involved in this. Well, she's doing it. She's creating that next generation, which I just find astonishing. Yeah. So Haley Richmond is a person to watch out for. She could be running the world. I don't know, but I'm looking forward to it.
Well, go ahead, Marigrace.
Oh, I was just going to say, Marilyn, I was going to add in a couple weeks back, I was at the American Society on Aging conference in Atlanta, and I ran into one of the prior Maude's Awards winners, Fayron Epps, who is presenting there. She's out of Emory University, but she has a program called Alter that supports Black churches in doing different educational and support programs for African American families. And she won, I think, 2 years back. You'll maybe remember better than I will. But anyway, since then, her program has exponentially grown. She's now operating out of at least 5 or 6 different states in supporting Black churches and doing really important work around that.
That's wonderful. Let's talk about the application process, because there might be some viewers or listeners watching this and they might be doing something similar and wanting to expand their operations or get their products or their support and resources into a wider, geographical area, but maybe they don't have the ability to do so, or they're not as well known, or they don't have the platform to do so. What do you recommend? Your application process just started, correct?
Yeah, we're in the process. So first of all, these are awards for things somebody has done. So it's not a grant. It's much less complicated than a grant proposal. And it's not something you want to do. I mean, there are no strings on this. Although we like to know what people are doing. So that they can go to www.maudesawards.org, and you can go on there. There's an application form. There's one for individuals and there's one for organizations. They're very short. We hope to make them user friendly. And they can fill those out, send them back to us. There's no need. They can call if they have any questions. And there's also, we have this, tips for making an application to give people guidance. But Marigrace, you've been involved in these applications. So what's your perspective?
I like to get the word out. I mean, you mentioned this, Marilyn, but I love for organizations and caregivers to know that this is really one of the most simple applications you'll ever fill out in terms of funding opportunities. You look at national grant applications and they can be like 75 pages long, all kinds of things you need to report on. And then you have monthly grant reports after that. But this is quite literally a gift for good work already done. And the application process is just a handful of questions reporting on the good work that you've been doing and who's been served. So I really encourage folks not to be daunted when they hear that term application.
Right.
It's quite simple.
I can also go online to see, because we put all of the winners plus some of the really notable applications every year in a handbook, so that they can go online and look at those books. They can order one. We will send them to them for free. And you can download them and you can see winning organizations and individuals and other organizations that have won. Just, if you want to be inspired or if you're looking for other resources.
Okay. I want to go back to Marigrace for a moment. What kind of response have you been getting this early on in the Memory Hub experience and the work you guys are doing?
The response has been very positive. I think for us, one thing that excites us is the fact that we're associated with a regional memory clinic out of University of Washington Medicine. And so, for a lot of people for too long, I think their diagnosis experience has often been one where you go to your doctor. If you're lucky, you go to your doctor.
Right.
And you find out what's going on and you receive that diagnosis. But oftentimes people being told, there's nothing we can do. So sorry. See you later, maybe. Head home, get your affairs in order. Basically that idea of like prepare to die message. And I'm so grateful that it's not the case here, and that folks, when they go to that regional memory clinic, can be, they get a diagnosis if they have one, and can be told, walk around the corner. There's a whole vibrant space dedicated toward you and next steps beyond your diagnosis, where you can get connected to multiple organizations and consider what you want your life to look like.
Yeah.
And so the response toward that has been very, very positive. And I think relieving for folks to feel like, oh, I don't have to figure out what are the next steps. I can just head right over to the Memory Hub.
Well, and I want to ask this to both of you. What has your experience been when people are first getting that diagnosis? For us, we serve, families here in Michigan, and the most common theme that we come across with these families is they go to the doctor, or they assume, or however it gets labeled, that the loved one has dementia. And then they leave, and that's all they're leaving with. They're not leaving with the support, the resources, the practical tips. Are you experiencing that as well with families that you encounter?
Well, I have a short story, which is a friend called me a few months ago, and he had just found out that his wife has a diagnosis of dementia. And he called me because he knew I worked in this field. And I said, well, the first thing I want you to know is that there is every reason to believe that she can live a life that engaged and connected to her community, and she can be happy and fulfilled. And he said, you're the only person who said that to me. And I said, well, it's true. And then he said to me, now what?
Yeah.
And people want to know, now what? And it's finding those answers. And that's where people like Marigrace are involved in that next step in particular, I think. What do you think, Mary?
How about you, Marigrace? What's your experience been with the families you're encountering?
Yes, I think by and large across the board, people often struggle to get a diagnosis to begin with. And then once they do, are often left hanging in terms of what does this mean for my life and how can I move forward? So I think I like to quote, there's a woman with dementia here in Seattle who's a national advocate, but she says, there's life after diagnosis. And that's the message I like to communicate to folks, because they don't often get to hear it.
Right. Yeah. And they're feeling hopeless, and then their loved ones feel hopeless. And, the advice we give them is, give them a purpose. They still have purpose, let them contribute, let them still feel their self-worth, and that life doesn't end just because you get a diagnosis. And I think that's for me, one of the biggest misconceptions that people often have is and I don't like to use this phrase, but it's almost like a death sentence, go home, sit there in that chair, and just everything's over now because you've been given that diagnosis. And one of the previous winners of the Maude Awards, Mary Crescenzo, she was a guest on the show last year, and the tremendous work that she's a part of with the arts and the all of the paintings and the things that she's doing. I mean, they can still contribute. Marilyn and I were speaking briefly prior to the interview here, and she's sharing the remarkable work her mother did painting. And I wanted to ask you, Marilyn, is that your connection to Alzheimer's and dementia, or do you have a story?
There, I mean, and that was through the Elderwise program. That as I was telling him, that we were told in our family that when someone developed dementia, we were supposed to just walk away. You're not supposed to ever talk about it again, and you're just supposed to pretend it never happened. Really helpful. So that was my orientation. So when Mom began to develop dementia, for a long time, we just ignored it. And then finally, when it became apparent that, and she was living in a continuing care facility, so she was incredibly fortunate. And then we took her to a Elderwise class, and she started to paint. And then all of a sudden, she was painting amazing things. And that's the first time I actually realized, oh, I see, she's still here. But I knew nothing. And unlike many people, I didn't want to know anything. And it was only going through that process of living with Mom for the next 8 years and being connected with her and not being afraid anymore, because the art drew me in past my fear because it was so fascinating. It was only then that I slowly began to learn. Every day I learned something new. And one of the first things I learned, because back in the old days, I would refer to Mother as suffering from dementia. And I kept hearing everyone I was working with saying, no, don't say that. And it was really. And then all of a sudden I realized, oh, of course, she's not suffering from, she's living with. Right. It was just this slow process. And I so wished I could have speeded it up a little bit, that I might have known something but I was so resistant and afraid of the disease that it was really hard for me to actually open up and learn. Now, probably that's not as hard for most people. I don't know. What do you think, Marigrace? Was I just an incredibly hard case here?
No. I think that I think your case is remarkable. In fact, of actually how much you did transform and your perspective transformed through the journey. But I think based on the culture and society that we live in, and the high emphasis that we place on cognition and rationality and logic, and all this idea that we are our brains, I think that it's common for people to feel like, oh well, little change in the brain and all is lost. But that's not the case.
Marigrace, I know we were mentioning that you have virtual and on-site resources for families at the Memory Hub, but if people aren't in Washington, what kind of inspiration can they take away from the Memory Hub? Or is there something that they could do to start something similar to it in their own areas?
Yeah, I think that I love to encourage folks about the idea of like taking a look at a model and thinking about, how does this apply in my own area? For us, there were some natural partners that we've been working with for multiple years, including, like I mentioned, like the Alzheimer's Association, or the Fry Art Museum that's right here next door, the Elderwise Adult Day program. But my encouragement to folks around the country would be, if they're curious about something similar to this, to be thinking about who are those natural partners in their own area. And if actually getting a physical building is challenging. But I would say putting aside the idea of having a physical building, but even just that concept of being able to collaborate with others who are doing good work for people with dementia or haven't yet considered that they could do good work on behalf of people with dementia. And to start by just trying a one-time thing together, like a one-time, one-off event, and thinking about, like I mentioned, the Fry Art Museum. It doesn't have to be a senior center or a senior focused or dementia focused organization that you work with. There's a lot of different, like Parks and Recreation or libraries are a great one. Faith communities are a great one. Thinking about who are those folks you could work with to better support people with dementia in your areas.
Wonderful. And I just want to follow up on the Fine Art Museum. This past winter, we had the privilege of having one of the curators and directors of the Carnegie Institute on the show. And the Carnegie Museum of Fine Art in Pittsburgh, which is the largest fine art museum under one roof, which I thought was really interesting. They were launching a special times and days for seniors and their caregivers, where they could go around to the different pieces of art. And, most museums, you're standing when you're viewing and looking, but they would have, chairs at the different stations so they could sit there and really appreciate the art. And they were doing different classes and virtual activities for caregivers and those that couldn't necessarily attend the museum, all geared around senior care and wellness. And it was a fascinating, program that they launched. Is that something similar to what you have at the Fine Art Museum in Washington?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right next door to the Memory Hub is the Fry Art Museum, and they've been doing creative aging programs for about 12 years, very similar to that and based off of a model out of MoMA.
Okay. Wonderful. I want to ask you ladies each another question, and thank you both so much for your time today. It's a real privilege to have you both here with us, and the tremendous work that Mr. Ferry started with the Maude Awards. And Marilyn, you're such a wonderful advocate for the work and the resources for families living with dementia. And I like we said, it's living with and not suffering with. And we hope that that stigma will slowly and gradually continue to dissipate, where people start recognizing how much life and how much more these people can still contribute and be a part of and live with it rather than feel like they're suffering with it. But Marigrace, as an applicant and a prior winner of the Maude Awards, what would you want to say to people who might be considering applying for this award and what it meant to you?
I would say if the idea is crossing your mind to apply, don't be on the fence, just apply. Just go for it.
Yes.
I already reiterated, it's not that hard. You'll be pleasantly surprised when you go to the website and see the application. It's just a few short paragraphs to fill out. And, even if you're a very small organization that doesn't have a grant writer, you can definitely do this. Even if you're a family caregiver that feels like, oh my gosh, I'm already overwhelmed. How can I carve out any time to write this up? You can do it. Carve out half an hour, get online and go ahead and apply. That's what I would say.
Wonderful. And Marilyn, would you share with our viewers and listeners the application dates, when they are closed?
Yeah, it started on March 13th and it closes on May 16th. So there's still time.
Still time.
Carve out that little half hour.
And for you personally, what do the Maude Awards mean to you?
A chance to do good, a chance to, in a way, this is unlike my family, but it's a way to honor my mother and to honor every person on this planet who is living with memory loss. That until we as a society actually believe that people living with memory loss have value and can live with purpose and meaning, we will not change the paradigm that people face. And that to be involved in that effort to help carry that news to people and ways to cope and live is a privilege beyond compare.
Well said. And we're going to have links to the Maude Awards up on the screen as well as in our show notes for people, and we encourage them to apply. It's not to be scared of. It's very easy. We heard it from Marigrace. And Marigrace, if people wanted to learn more about the Memory Hub, where should they go to see more?
The easiest way is just to go online to the website, which is thememoryhub.org. Thememoryhub.org.
We'll have that up on the screen. And I just want to thank you both so much for your time today and for the remarkable work that you're both doing. And thank Mr. Ferry for doing this wonderful thing to honor Maude, as well as to continue the great work of resources and support for these families and their loved ones.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Thank you for joining us today here at All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here to help families as they navigate these long-term care issues. We invite you to visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's a private, secure, fillable form where you can give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. And remember, you can listen to the show on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms or watch the show on our official YouTube channel. Just make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. We'd also like to say thank you again to Marilyn Raichle and Marigrace Becker for joining us today to discuss the Maude's Awards. Make sure to visit their site and fill out your application if you're interested in applying. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of All Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.